Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Gold Silver Bitcoin Show brought to you by the GoldSilverBitcoin.com store. We are more than honored to be sitting down with Bitcoin Ben, who's got all the energy. I'm so pleased to be sitting down with him.
Hey, how you doing, Justin?
Doing great, Ben. So you have a history as a trucker, and I think there's been a lot of discussion about the trucking industry in the last 18 months in particular. It's only heated up since the supply chain issues were on people's radars. So are you hearing anything on the ground from your friends who have been truckers? And if so, what has that been?
Yeah, I have several friends who are truck drivers and also own trucking companies. And they, there's such a shortage of truckers that, let's see, I left trucking about 2 years ago. The average wage of a truck driver has gone up about 60% since I left. When I left, I think I was making about 21 an hour. Now it's up to like 36 bucks an hour. I That's a big jump, and they're not only having trouble getting truckers, now they're having trouble actually getting parts for the trucks because a lot of these parts are actually made in China and in like Mexico and all over the world, and they aren't being able to be shipped or even produced out wherever they're made because of the rules with like vaccinations and all of that has hampered a lot of the global supply chain. And unfortunately, I think we're in some real trouble here. And I think it's only going to get worse.
On the supply chain front, do you have any insights into what's been going on there? I hear reports of just container and cargo ships stopped off of the coast of Los Angeles, for instance. I was on a flight from Spokane, Washington to a conference in Las Vegas, Coin Agenda, which was actually where I ran into you for the first time. I don't think we met there, but you're speaking at Bix Weir's event. And so they were talking about on the plane, the flight attendant, how they were flying into LA and they could just see all the cargo ships parked off of the coast. So do you have any insight into what might be causing that and what role truckers could play in fixing that problem, or if you've heard anything on the ground from them about that?
Yeah, in fact, I was out in California last week, and I was literally from my hotel. I could see that lane of ships. And while I was there, I had the opportunity to have a conversation with a few longshoremen. And these are the union guys who unload these large ships. And excuse me, sorry about that. And apparently something very weird is going on out there because they're not able to unload the ships. They aren't actually being allowed to. And they also aren't allowed to pre-inventory them. What that means is if you have ships that are actually out there waiting, you can you have an employee or usually a few employees who will actually go out to the ship and inventory the ship while it's out there waiting, so that when it's actually docked, you have all of that wrapped up already and you just grab off and go. Well, they're not being allowed to pre-inventory them. This is a man-made slowdown. This is the union members aren't happy. The union leadership are pretending like they're not happy, but yet they're aware that the hours of operations are actually being manipulated where they cannot catch up. And they have truck drivers waiting. So the trucking industry right there, they might have fewer trucks, but they still have trucks waiting on cargo. It's very weird, very unusual for truck drivers to have to wait that long there. They're usually in and out. And there's something very suspicious going on there. Someone is actually causing that backup on purpose.
What could the effects thereof be? We're starting to see some of this with certain items not being on shelves. I have had people say that the U.S. is moving from a selection-based economy to an availability-based economy. That's yet to see. But right now, obviously, if the food's not able to get to the stores, then people aren't going to be able to buy the food at the stores. I'm experiencing difficulty getting spring water. Could you tell us like what the effects of this might be? And I guess as a kind of offshoot of that, how important truckers are to the U.S. economy?
Oh, truck drivers are the blood of every country. We actually carry all of the nutrients. We actually carry all the supplies. If you have it, it was on a truck. Let's just put it that way. And without truck drivers, it's like not having blood. It just doesn't work in the economy that we're used to. Now, what you just explained is absolutely right. Where we're used to going out and shopping and having everything available to us. Well, that's shifting and that's changing. And the situation we're running into here, I don't think people appreciate how serious this is. See, Venezuela, the issue with the Venezuela currency and hyperinflation wasn't that they had printed up too much money. It was they didn't have enough to purchase. There were too few things to buy with the money. If they would have had shelves of everything, they would have never had hyperinflation because the amount of the money supply would have equaled the available products to actually purchase. And what we're running into here is that exact same problem where we're reaching a point now where the shelves, especially towards Christmas, and this is why I'm afraid of where we're heading. we're heading in the exact same direction as Venezuela or Germany, like 1918, where there is nothing to purchase. And once we hit that point, it's every man and for himself trying to grab up some toilet paper.
Of course, from the Weimar Republic, there's the images of people wheelbarrowing money in, and that price is changing during the course of a meal out at a restaurant. And so could you tell us also, like, now, what are the implications, do you think, for the holidays? We've heard some kind of discussions about there being altered Thanksgivings and altered Christmases actually for a couple of years now. Are your fears coming out by the end of this year? Or do you think this is more of a long-term happening?
Well, I've heard from a local show who has a lot of contacts with people who produce turkey, that the price of your turkey is probably going to run you twice what it was last year. I saw a graph that the average turkey last year was $27, something like that. And the average turkey this year is going to be about $55. And that's a lot of inflation in 1 year. And what is driving that is a lot of very controllable factors that are not, yeah. Oh, yep, just drop it right there, brother. Okay, there you go. All right, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Sorry about that. Oh, we got issues here because this is not only turkey, this is ham, this is bread, this is milk, this is all of our products. Prices are going up, and at the same time, we have a labor shortage that is driving up prices higher, because it's a vicious circle where you don't have the employees, so you can't produce. You can't produce, so there's less goods. There's less goods, so the prices go up. And then as an employer, you have to raise the wage that you're offering employees. So then you have to pass those costs on, which adds to inflation. We're in a bad place right now, but it is fixable. But I don't see it getting any better until we replace the government that we have now.
Do you have any memories of being a trucker that stand out to you? Any fun memories in particular, or anything at all? Maybe something touching.
Yeah, I'm a very emotional person. I always liked the idea that I brought people things they liked. or things they needed, you know. And I've I've always enjoyed having a job, and truck driving, like, I can remember whenever, like, my kids were younger, they'd actually love riding in the truck with me. You know, they're like, "Oh, it's a big truck," you know, and they love that. And I mean, we head out, we get on the highway, and they'd be climbing all over the truck and having fun. And we'd actually pull over and get lunch, and you know, just it 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 was a great job. And I left trucking for something I found more passion in, and that is actual Bitcoin. And the reason that I left a job I loved is because I found a purpose I loved more, which was helping people realize the transition that we're going into. The reason Bitcoin is 61,000 or whatever it is right now, it isn't because we're in a hype cycle. It isn't because it's in this huge, you know, it's in a bubble. No, we're not in a bubble. We're in a transition. We're in a transition just like we were in the mid 1990s, where we're transitioning into a higher technology. And it's it's you it's the equivalent of actually saying, well, the internet is in just a bubble. No, it isn't in a bubble. It's on a lane of adoption. Well, that's what Bitcoin is. It's in a lane of adoption where more and more people realize what it is and how quickly it's growing, and which brings in more and more people. And that idea of transition, I actually wanted to help as many regular people, you know, actually get in cryptos as early as possible. And that's what I've actually been lucky enough over the last 6 years to help people do.
How did you discover Bitcoin and what were your first thoughts? What was the transition like? For me, actually, I was working in a gold shop and a silver shop, and there was a lot of questions about Bitcoin. And as a digital native, I was interested in it as well. This is dating back to 2011, 2012. And then at Freedom Fest, Las Vegas, summer of 2012, a gentleman named Trace Mayer walked up to me, who I had known and who had been talking to me about Bitcoin at the shop. He said, if you don't get into Bitcoin, like, it'll basically be a very big mistake. And the rest is history. I bought GoldSilverBitcoin.com that day, and I've been working in the industry ever since. So I came from gold and silver background. So back then it was the global financial crisis that was gracing headlines worldwide. And there was a lot of talk about gold and silver as inflation hedges. Silver was severely undervalued. Back then it was $9. And that the narrative was that silver was severely undervalued, which I would suggest it might very well still be today. But that aside, I was already into alternative assets, gold and silver, then Bitcoin sort of lent itself to that. And today I still see a lot of overlaps between gold bugs, silver bugs, and Bitcoiners. So I'm curious, how did you find Bitcoin? What was the discovery like, and the journey?
Ironically, I was driving a truck. This was like 2014, maybe, no, this was like 2011 or 2012. And I heard an interview with Trace Mayer on talk radio, and he explained it, and it made sense. And I'm like, well, that's very interesting. Well, after the interview, I kind of forgot about it. I talked with my wife a little bit about it, but we didn't do anything, and life eventually moved on. And then I heard another interview in 2015 with Trace Mayer, ironically, and that's whenever it really clicked. Plus, it was easier to actually purchase at that time, because when I initially heard of it, it was hard. I mean, it was hard to get Bitcoin. Well, when I heard of it the second time, I had an iPhone. I hopped on, oh, look, Coinbase. And I think when I got into Bitcoin, it was about 600, and Litecoin was maybe like $3 or $4. If that, Ethereum was only like $7. And as you said, the rest is history.
Why is your passion lying currently with Bitcoin in particular? And how does that tie in with helping people gain financial literacy, freedom, etc.?
Well, that's a great question, because it explains a lot. It's when you initially get interested in cryptocurrencies like actual Bitcoin, you're watching the price go up and you're like, wow, I want some of that money. But then once you're in and you own it, it's almost naturally educational that you ask yourself, well, why is this going up? And that leads you to, gold and silver and also Bitcoin, because all of those are avenues of escaping and inflating currency. So once you realize that the money in your pocket is losing purchasing power, you really realize why silver and gold and cryptos and actually Bitcoin, why they're all going up. Because it isn't that gold and silver and Bitcoin are just absolutely amazing, in themselves. It's the old system and the Federal Reserve are so bad that you're like, I would rather own a rare piece of what looks like just a regular piece of metal. I'd rather own that than own currency. That's pretty bad. That shows you, it's like, wow, that's horrible. And I own, I don't know if you can see that. I own silver, I own gold, and I also own Bitcoin. And there's a reason for that. The reason is the rest of all of the currencies, it isn't just the American dollar, it's the euro, it's the pound, it's every currency in the world is losing purchasing power, and everyone's running to gold and silver and cryptos. And now gold and silver have been manipulated using like derivatives and paper futures contracts, and they silver should be at least $600 an ounce right now, I think. And gold should be sitting at about at least $25,000 an ounce. And the only thing holding those back is the illusion created by the paper contracts. Now, with cryptos, they're not so easily manipulated, especially Bitcoin, because the purchase of an actual Bitcoin, when you receive your purchase and you hold it in a true crypto wallet, that is a register of that transaction. And every on-chain purchase is registered on that blockchain. It's the equivalent of if every coin, every silver coin ever bought every day was registered at one ledger. If you could do that in silver, silver would be $800 an ounce, $900 an ounce. Hell, who knows how high silver would go? But because it is a physical item that is locally purchased, that purchase isn't reflected in one place for everybody. Where cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, they're all registered on the blockchain. So everyone who is buying actual Bitcoin is showing up on one blockchain as volume. And that volume is what sets the price.
When you were listening to Trace Mayer all those years back, what sort of points about Bitcoin resonated to you back then in particular?
It was the idea that it was an absolute incorruptible supply, that it was predictable inflation that was actually cut in half every 4 years. And that is a formula for price appreciation. That's what creates price appreciation. Because right now, as with our economy, we're having a shortage of actual Bitcoin. That's why the prices of actual Bitcoin is going up, because we have a shortage. There isn't enough out there for everyone who wants it. So everyone who wants it has to pay a higher price. And the fact that in the last year and a half, we have went from $3,000 up to $64,000 shows you the amount of interest that and the availability of the retail to actually purchase it.
At Bitcoin 2021, a gentleman told me that he felt like he was actually at a Q rally. I understood the sentiment. I noticed a lot of overlap between the American conservative movement and the talk that the Bitcoiners were having at that conference. For instance, Ron Paul headlined that event. He opened up that event and spoke about libertarian issues, his experience as a Republican congressman and presidential candidate, as well as his belief in financial freedom generally and the issues that the dollars are having. The rest of the time, there's a lot of discussion about central banks, about debt, etc. Have you noticed this overlap between the American conservative movement and the Bitcoiners, and what do you make of it?
I think it is the reason there's overlap is because each of them were created from the lack of trust in our government. When you realize that the Federal Reserve is not federal, and you realize that the government is actually devaluing the currency and literally hurts the populace of their country with their currency, it shows you the lack of love or even respect that the government has for the people of our country. And if a government will corrupt the currency that bad, then what else will they corrupt? Everything. Healthcare, laws, judges, government officials who all vote on all of this. Once you realize that the government does not have the best interest in mind for us with a currency, something that important, it also shows you that maybe in healthcare or laws or the way they are governing us in other areas, maybe they're not as honest as they say they are too. And that's where each group recognizes or realizes that the enemy of the people is the actual federal government.
And I would actually bring in Black Lives Matter to that discussion in terms of recognizing that there's something wrong. There's clearly something wrong, and this shouldn't be so unfair. Now, it's interesting. We all recognize there are problems, and actually, I would say our what we believe is the problem is a lot closer than it seems in the media. However, when it comes to solutions, we're on completely different planets, it seems. It's a Tower of Babel situation almost. So we have now on the Bitcoin American conservative side of things, there is this continuation of a certain tradition, classical philosophy dating all the way back to the Greeks and the early democracies and republics, all the way through to the Enlightenment, and then the American Revolution, which is back then probably more aligned with what's termed a classical liberalism, today noted as libertarianism probably, but really I think that there's a thread from modern libertarianism to classical liberalism. Some of the difference might be like classical liberalism did seem to have an element of belief in God, whereas perhaps modern libertarianism doesn't. But nonetheless, sort of these ideas in the individual supremacy, that an individual can make decisions best for him or herself, that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are noble goals, equality as well. And there is, I think, a lot of overlap in the American conservative movement and Bitcoin, because both of these movements are coming from pretty much the same history of philosophy. As Patrick Byrne has mentioned, that he sees Bitcoin as really an extension of classical liberalism, of classical philosophy. Do you have any thoughts on that?
The the issues that we're having in our country are actually, they're created and they're ginned up off of this idea that we've moved away from, that the most valuable entity in the world is the individual. It isn't the collective. See, the collective is a group of individuals, but the individual can never influence the collective. So the idea that we have to change our country, or that we should move more socialist, or we should move more communist, is absolutely not aligned with the laws of nature. And you really have to grasp that society and the organization of society has to reflect nature, or the society will fail. And that's why so many of us, Austrian economics, because Austrian economics is just an economic application of what happens in the natural world. It's a value added economic structure that actually it mimics the natural value added structure in the world, where a tree absorbs, nutrients from the earth. That's a value add. That tree grows taller, and as it grows taller, it is adding on to its value, or to its size. That's Austrian economics. And that's why Austrian economics works. It's value added, where socialism and communism are not value added structures. And that's why it's never worked, because it isn't a natural organization of a community.
So if you're speaking with somebody who didn't know much about Bitcoin, had heard about Bitcoin, were perhaps only interested in gold and silver, what are the key things you would want them to walk away from a conversation with Bitcoin Ben knowing about Bitcoin?
Yeah, it's very simple. I agree with you. I agree with you on why you hold silver. I agree with you on why you hold gold. What I'm saying is that the changing of technology is shifting what humans value. It isn't that people hate silver. It isn't that people hate gold. It's that humanity is moving into a digital world where where the things we value are shifting out of the physical world, and they are moving into the digital world. And just like silver and gold in the physical world, they have certain attributes that are tremendous for holding purchasing power in the physical world. Well, in the digital world, that is represented by cryptocurrencies like actual Bitcoin. It's not that it's one or the other. It's online. As our lives move more and more online, our value will move online too, like online shopping. It's exactly the same thing. So I would recommend the people who hold gold and silver, absolutely. That's great. That's a great idea. But also understand that value is transitioning online, and you might want to hold a little bit of the gold of the internet in the digital world, just like you hold the gold of the physical world.
What do your trucker friends say about Bitcoin when you tell them about it? When they hear that you're a Bitcoin celebrity too?
Oh, they love it. They absolutely love it. They get, because I've always preached, you know, like, hey, the Federal Reserve's not federal, and Jekyll Island and all this. They they always they always knew I was crazy. They just never really realized I would get as popular with my craziness as I have online.
What's it like becoming so popular online?
It's weird. It's very interesting. I've actually been out in public and all over the world actually, and had people walk up and go, "You're Bitcoin Ben," and I'm like, "Wow, well, don't tell anybody." It's 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 very interesting having millions of people watch you. It's also very humbling that many people um, like me and like my show, and I really appreciate it.
You mentioned earlier you have children. So I'm curious, like, what's your hope for the future of humanity? What's your hope for where things head? As you mentioned, you're worried about how things are heading right now, but what's your hope for the future of humanity?
Honesty. That's all we need. We just need honesty. The reason that gold and silver and Bitcoin is so valuable, we've lost trust. We've lost trust in our government. We've lost trust in our currency. And I think this is a great reset for honesty. And I hope so.
My father was raised on the north side of Chicago, and so I was raised as a Chicago Cubs fan, an ardent one. So it was pretty special in 2016 when they won the World Series from a family perspective, actually. But I'm curious, how did this season go for the Cards overall?
Not very good. We didn't do very well. We need a little bit more pitching. We definitely need some hitters, and hopefully the management is bringing up some younger players to help us out.
We've had the honor of sitting down today with Bitcoin Ben. Thank you so much, Bitcoin Ben, for joining us today.
No problem, brother. Thank you.
And thank you everyone for listening.